This morning we're happy to have Reverend Tamara Suzuki to lead our service, and she is joined by Worship Associate Barbara Finch. This is a community of compassion and love. Together we live life's questions. Our congregation is a safe place to feel uncomfortable. By that I mean we don't promise to supply each other with easy answers, but we do commit ourselves to be loving company in which to engage the questions that draw us more deeply into life's history. After worshiping together, we make time for coffee, tea, and conversation on the patio, and we take the opportunity to reach out to new acquaintances, to welcome new seekers in our midst. Everyone is encouraged to read the Acorn Bulletin, either on paper or online, which highlights the many ways that we create fellowship and put our values into action. And please join us for our barbecue today at 11:30 at Tucker's Grove. We're glad you're with us this morning.
Our call to worship this morning comes from Manish Mishra Marzetti. Between the rocking of the boat and sitting down, between stirring things up and peaceably going along, we find ourselves here in community, each called from many different journeys, many different life paths onto this river road. Some are here because the rocking of the boat has been too much. Too much tumult, too much uncertainty, too much pain. Some are here with questions about where the boat is going, how best to steer it, where this journey ends. Others are here as lovers of the journey, lovers of life itself. Here in front, beside, behind, each of us a passenger, each a captain, doing the best we can. Rest here in your boat with me, the river calls. Listen to how I flow, the sound of life coursing all around you. Let the current hold you. Let the current guide you. The river that gently flows through your soul whispers, "Come, let us worship together." Let us pay attention to things that are of worth. How many of you have heard of the story of the Good Samaritan? Is that anything anybody knows? Being good Unitarian Universalist children, this is important that Bible literacy becomes part of what you know, because in Western civilization, people will say things like, "So, you know, the Good Samaritan," and as you want to say, "Ah, yes, the Good Samaritan, I know that story." So the story this morning is the story of the Good Samaritan. It's from the Christian scriptures. And while I'm telling the story, the adults have a picture of the story as it was told in the Middle Ages from the cathedral in Chartres, France. So you can look at the story up on the screen. And it goes like this. One day there was a man who was walking down a path between Jerusalem and Jericho. And suddenly a gang of thieves jumped out from behind rocks, and they started beating him, and they said, "We want all your money." And he said, No, don't take my money. I need my money. I have a wife, I have a family. Please don't take my money. But guess what they did? They did. The head of the gang of thieves took a rock and they bonked him on his head, and he fell down. And so they took his money and they took his clothes, and they left this poor man laying there on this dusty road all by himself, and they ran off. And after a while, there was a priest who came down the road, and he saw the man lying by the side of the road. What do you suppose he did? He didn't do anything. He just walked right on past. And then next, there was another man, a Levite, and he came, and he saw this poor man lying on the side of the road, and he just left him there also. And a long time passed, and the poor man's laying there, and flies are buzzing around his head, and he has injuries, but luckily, someone else was coming down the road, and he was a Samaritan, and the Samaritan was riding on his donkey. Now, the people of Samaria were not friendly with the people of this man's country. They were actually sworn enemies of each other. So what do you suppose this man did when he saw the man lying there in the road? He didn't hesitate. He saw there was a fellow human being who needed help, and he went over and he said, I feel compassion. I feel like I could be that man on the road. And so he lifted the man up, and he brought wine and oil from his bag, and he tended to his wounds, and he covered him with a robe, gave him some water, some cool water to drink, and he actually put him on his donkey, and he walked alongside, and he took the man to the nearest town, and he gave money to the innkeeper of the town and said, here's enough money to keep this wounded man and tend to him until I come back to town again. And I will pay you whatever it takes to keep him here and help him start getting healthy again. So what do you think of that story? Right? He was being good to him. Exactly. That if you were that person, it wouldn't feel good. And that's the deepest lesson in this story, is to try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Try to feel what they might be feeling and do what you would want them to do to you. And so today is the first of an occasional sermon in a series that will highlight one of the ministries here at Live Oak. We have so many people serving this congregation in such a myriad of various capacities, and every now and then I'll devote a service to lift up the work done by the various ministries of the church. And the hope is that you, the congregation, will gain a better understanding of who is serving and what the different ministries of the church are. And today is devoted to our Pastoral Care Associates ministry team, who I would like to invite forward at this time to a reading.
We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted.
We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid.
We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again.
We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone.
We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs.
We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again.
We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands to prepare us for the journey.
All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
So these are many of the people on your Pastoral Care Associates team this year. In December of 2012, a group of Tibetan monks currently living in exile in southern India came to the congregation that I was serving at the time. They were there to spread their message of love and compassion. And over the span of 5 days, they created the amazing sand mandala that you see before you here on the screens. The process of making that mandala began with this beautiful blessing ceremony. And then the monks formed the design on a black table. They measured it, and they had string with chalk, and they flipped the, I don't know what the name for that is, but they flipped the chalk lines, and they made the images on there from scratch. I was wondering how they were going to do that part. And over the next 4 days, I spent hours standing there, watching this mandala be created. Sometimes just being with the monks in their painstaking work for solidarity. Hour after hour, they took turns scratching. They had cones that had ridges on them, and they would put the sand in the cones, and they would rub the ridges, and the sand would come out, and they were hunched over, making this beautiful, incredibly intricate design. And then on the Sunday morning, as part of our worship service, the last little bit of the mandala was completed. The mandala and all those who were present were blessed. And then with this beautiful process and ceremony, the mandala was swept away. It is traditional that the sand from mandalas, as they're swept away, are taken to the nearest water source, scattered in the water. But instead, we distributed sand to all those present, asking them to spread it far and wide. Standing here before you now, telling you this, I still feel how I felt that day as they swept that sand mandala. It was a mixture of grief and joy and so many other emotions coursing through me. Mandalas such as this one are created with many layers of meaning, both in the design itself and in the process involved in the making. A key teaching in Buddhism is the impermanence of life, and thus the mandala is swept away to symbolize life's transitory nature. This experience was deeply moving, deeply spiritual, and the memory is deeply held, as I still actually have a bit of the sand from the mandala that you see. And today I wear the stole that was given to me by the monks on that Sunday morning. Now, I realize the irony here. In the lesson on the impermanence of life, I've held on to these tangible reminders. What can I say? I'm human, and I definitely am still on the path with every other soul on this planet, trying to come to grips with the concept that things and people that are loved so deeply are not permanent. None of us is permanent. That people move or they die. They move away or they die. That houses and possessions can burn or fade away or be lost. But that all is as the sand in the mandala, beautiful for an instant and then swept away. And because all is impermanent, because all is change, we are also bound together in the sorrow, in the grief, and in the joy as we move through this. Of course, not all change creates sadness, but many times, even if the change is good, it still may be tinged with the sorrow for what is lost and cannot be regained. UU minister Forrest Church has said, religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. And so it is that we come together in religious community. We live out the shared humanity in the web of love that holds us and connects us in those times of suffering and pain. And the hope that we cling to as we travel our path of life is that together we share the burden of grief and suffering. Together we regain hope for the future. and together we seek to lighten each other's way to wholeness and healing. We look for meaning in our suffering, and we try to make sense of our lives, and many times the meaning is to be found in the shared experience of our human condition. On the whole, we Unitarian Universalists are a rather optimistic and compassionate lot. Our optimism and compassion come into play as we face this inevitable suffering of our human existence. We go along with our modern culture to a certain extent as we're told to follow our bliss, but there is also a value to being present to pain and suffering as a means to move through it and come out stronger on the other side. Grief and sadness is not something to be avoided, even though at times we really wish we could, but rather they become part of a pathway to a deeper spiritual maturity, especially when we share this journey with our fellow religionists. In 2005, the Unitarian Universalist Commission on Appraisal produced a report titled Embracing Our Theological Diversity. I'm sure some of you have read it. It's a wonderful report, and you might even have a copy in our new library. In that report, it states, Unitarian Universalism is an encouraging rather than a despairing religion. When our days are dreary and crises bedevil us, spiritual kin step forward to lift us up or push us forward by offering affection and comfort. This is a great strength of our faith. In fact, we hold this so dearly that it's embodied in our third Unitarian Universalist principle, which says, we affirm and promote the acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We accept one another, and we see it as our responsibility and privilege to companion one another through the various ups and downs in our lives. And we also challenge one another to stretch and to grow our souls. This caring for one another is a primary expression of our Unitarian Universalist theology and a foundational ministry in our congregation. I love the image of the live oak tree that you see on the front of your order of service every Sunday, standing with its sheltering limbs, shading each and all under its broad expanse. Here at Live Oak, our goal is that every member will be cared for in their time of need, and every member will be expected to help support another. One important part of this back and forth flow is that each person must know that it's their responsibility to reach out and let members of the Pastoral Care Associates team or myself know if you are in a place where you could use that assistance and help from others. There are many levels of care that we provide for each other. Every single person here today, each and every one of us, has a mandate to treat our fellow travelers with compassion and love. To treat each other with compassion, which means that if one suffers, then we suffer. Calm, a prefix meaning with, passion, any powerful emotion or feeling. We are moved to action by this feeling of deep connection and have a desire to be present to companion the person who is suffering. We witness and are present to the pain of our brother or sister. And it's no surprise that our UU faith holds compassion so strongly as a guiding virtue. Compassion at its core is an understanding of the interdependence of all part of one another, all intimately tied together in the web of life, as our seventh UU principle expresses it. Compassion is love in action. It's a verb. Mother Teresa said, Love cannot remain by itself. It has no meaning. Love has to be put into action and service. Whatever form we are, able or disabled, rich or poor, it is not how much we do, but how much love we put into the doing. A lifelong sharing with others. Love in action is compassion. So each and every person in this congregation is part of our broader network of caring, ministering to each other through a smile or a handshake or a hug. But beyond this level of caring and ministry, there's a special group of people who you met earlier who work with me, your minister, and they are our pastoral care associates. These are the people who, week after week, help us to live out our commitment of compassion to one another in a very special way. They do the work of helping to find rides or meals for congregants in temporary need of assistance, and they send cards. But the service goes even deeper than that. They work with me to visit people who are hospitalized or who are ill or suffering, those who are homebound and cannot be with us here on Sundays, or who have experienced illness or death in their families. This is not an easy ministry. The way of compassion calls for us to acknowledge another's pain, but not become a part of it. It's hard to be present to someone's suffering and grief, knowing that our role isn't necessarily to fix it, even if we could, but rather to be present, provide a listening ear, maybe a helping hand. It's sometimes hard to know where the limits of involvement should be. There's a funny saying about compassion. It's about a person who was so compassionate, so benevolent, and so merciful a man that in his mistaken passion, he would have held an umbrella over a duck in a shower of rain. Super compassionate. Well, we try not to hold umbrellas over ducks in rainstorms. They'll do fine without us. But we are here to companion, to walk with, and to comfort, which means literally to comfort, to place our strength alongside another person. And sometimes that's all any of us can do. We can't fix things no matter how desperately we wish we could. My mom used to say that she wished she had that magic wand and could just wave it and fix everything that needed fixing. But in the long run, that's not really what's called for. Going through the pain and suffering is just part of our journey of life, being human. Our joy is just our sorrow unmasked, said Khalil Gibran. And our forefather, Unitarian forefather Theodore Parker said, "When I look over my life, I find no disappointment and no sorrow I could afford to lose." Now, I know for a fact there are some things in my life that I wish with all my heart I could have avoided, a few things I could afford to lose. But then again, each of them has contributed to making me the person that I am today. Each sorrow, each joy, whether we want to or not, becomes grist for the mill in our life. And when I think about my life without those times of sorrow, it becomes like the question of the journey of a time traveler. If I hadn't gone through that event or lost that person, how would my life be different today? Where would my path have taken me? And it's a given that I probably wouldn't be the person that stands before you today. And so it is in each of our lives. It's in this interplay of despair and hope, joy and sorrow, that together we form the stuff of our lives, and it becomes ours to welcome with gratitude, or at least with equanimity, all the changes in our lives. There's a story told of a monk who lived in a monastery high on a mountain, and one day he descended into the village, below, and a peasant ran up to him and said, "Oh, Father, surely yours must be the best of all lives, living so close to God. Tell me, what do you do up there?" And after a thoughtful pause, the monk replied, "What do we do? Well, I'll tell you. We fall down, and then we get up. And then we fall down, and then we get up. And then we fall down, and then we get up." That's pretty much what our lives look like. What does yours look like? How lucky we are to have each other as we fall down and get up over and over again. And how lucky we are to welcome new people into our ever-expanding circle of love and compassion, because fortunately, there is no limit to love. We take care of members of this beloved community and welcome all who find their home here. And then we extend that love and compassion beyond these walls to our brothers and sisters who are suffering, and to work to heal our earth. And in the end, most of us would probably agree that even if we were somehow given that magic wand and given the option of a life without any suffering, we probably wouldn't take it. UUs are a fairly clear-seeing people who generally do not go for an idea of heaven where all pain is gone and angels play harps all day and everyone eats chocolate. Sorry, that last one's fine. Instead, we are called theologically to build heaven here and now. There's a parable told about the difference between heaven and hell. A group of people with their arms, the old-fashioned kind of splints, are sitting around this big bowl of soup. But because they cannot bend their elbows, they can't bring the soup to their mouths to eat. And that is hell. But heaven is the same group of people sitting around the same table, taking the soup and feeding each other, caring for each other, sheltering each other. As the old Irish proverb says, it is in the shelter of each other that the people live. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. In the shelter of each other, we created the beautiful mandala that is the stuff of our lives. We know that the sand will someday be blown away, swept away, and we know that we live in this dual reality of being alive and having to die. But while we are here, we live and we love and we reach out to one another in compassion. And in the end, it all comes back to the fact that you are loved, you are beautiful, and you are forever held in the shade of the sheltering limbs of this community. Blessed be. Amen. Our faith, this congregation, is dedicated to the proposition that behind all of our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity which makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity. And may the blessings of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. And may love's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore. Blessed be. Amen. So be it.